Greg Tepper and Greg Powers from Dave Campbell's Texas Football here on National Signing Day 2023, the biggest day on the recruiting calendar. And right now, we're going to break down what the Texas Longhorns and Coach Steve Sarkisian were able to do on the recruiting trail. And Powers, okay. Texas finishes with the number 3 rated class in the nation, the top class in Texas. Yeah. I've heard this all before. Okay, I've been covering football in the state of Texas long enough. Oh, of course, Texas brought in a great recruiting class. Why is this year's group different, and why should Texas fans be excited about this group?
That's a great question, Tep. Actually, you're right. Texas always has a great recruiting class, and it just seems lately that it hasn't always produced on the field from a win-loss perspective. But I just feel like this is the class that's different. And I think that Steve Sarkisian and his staff will be there throughout the course of it to see it develop on the field, right? We saw the schedule that came out. They have a tough schedule next year, and they need to produce wins. They got a number 1 quarterback coming back in next year's class. But as I look at this class, what I feel like is different is that they kept these great defensive players home, where they've been going to Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson or, wherever that may be. Other schools, LSU, Kalavon Chason, those type of guys. They kept Anthony Hill at home, who is maybe the best linebacker I've covered in Texas. He's at least I think the highest rated one, number 2 in the state. Very easily could have been in the mix at number 1. He only played 6 games during his senior season. He dealt with some injury issues. But what he put down on tape in those 6 games is pretty remarkable. 6'2", 225, 230 pounds. He runs like a receiver. He's able to track the ball very quickly. He's ready to go from a physical standpoint. Linebacker's like one of those spots it's tough to play year 1, let's face it. But Hill has the intangibles, the physical attributes to be able to get it done. They kept Manny Muhammad at home from South Oak Cliff. Alabama, Nick Saban really tried to get Muhammad to flip his commitment. Like, he was one of their top targets. As a matter of fact, their pitch to him was, we can build our defense around you. That's how good of a talent Malik Muhammad is. And he's a guy that, honestly, those guys haven't been staying in Texas a whole lot, right? Texas A&M had the number 1 class last year, kept a lot of those guys at home. But before that, a lot of these guys were escaping the state and going on to these other programs. That's why I think this class could be different. The defensive guys are staying home. And, of course, you know what? Texas fans are going to love to hear this. They flipped Colton Vasek from OU to stay in Austin, right? Garrett Wilson went to Ohio State. Some of these top-tier guys in the area had been leaving. They kept that number 1 guy in the city at home. And I think, 3 years down the line, we could be comparing him to Aiden Hutchinson. So I think that was a huge, huge win as it relates to recruiting their own city.
Okay, so Texas is moving to the SEC soon. They're bound for the Southeastern Conference. Did you, as a guy who's covered recruiting for as long as you have in the state of Texas, did you notice any sort of changes in their approach with this class because of their move to the SEC?
Well, they were able to, yeah, I think I did. I'm going to kind of, this like maybe a twofold type of answer. The first part of it is they did an excellent job of going outside the state to get key guys that they might have needed. They've secured the number 1 running back in the country in Cedric Baxter Jr. from Orlando, Florida, right underneath the noses of some of these top SEC programs. He was great in the Under Armour All-America game. That was really like my first chance to see him play live. We all watched his tape probably if you're a Texas fan or a fan of recruiting in general. We know that he was going to be good. 6'1", 215. So key guys, when they've had to leave the state, they've went and got him. They got Arch Manning, the number 1 rated quarterback in the country, coming from the Manning family, and by all accounts, probably one of the most popular recruits to ever go through the process. He's going to instantly push Quinn Ewers to be better, because if Quinn Ewers doesn't play good, they have Arch Manning sitting behind him who does want to get on the field, and they will put him on the field if they need to. So that's going to make the quarterback room instantaneously better in my eyes. But one thing I did notice is that they really went after bigger bodies. They did that in state. You got Connor Stroh, Andre Kojo, some big guys, on the offensive line. They signed a couple big offensive linemen last year as well. But you need these big bodies to start to compete. And another guy that jumped out to me, as an out-of-state commitment was Sidear Mitchell from Bergen Catholic up in New Jersey. 6'5", 335-pound defensive lineman. This guy is a monster. I absolutely love his tape. This is a big dude you just can't block, and he's very nimble for being 6'5", 335. Actually, I watching his tape, 335 maybe light. He might be pushing 360, 370. This is a huge dude. But looking at that, you need this size to compete in the trenches in the SEC. And I think looking specifically at this class, Texas did a tremendous job of getting these big bodies. They have started to change that roster, to me, in a positive way, to go in and go in a road game to Baton Rouge, or go to Alabama or Tennessee or Georgia and compete with some of these other teams. And that's the size that they need to do it.
Okay, so look, there's obviously a lot of top end talent in this class. But I look at last year's team, and yes, Bijan Robinson was incredible, but you can make a real argument that their best player was Jalen Ford. Jalen Ford was a 3-star guy coming out of Frisco Lone Star, right? I mean, a guy who didn't have necessarily, he wasn't at the top of what everybody was talking about in that class. Who's this year's Jalen Ford? Who's the guy that is flying under the radar that may in fact be the real steal or the real gem of this class?
That's a tough question to answer, because as I recall it, Jalen Ford wasn't rated in any top 100 list, right? Not in the state of Texas. I don't want to say that he was an afterthought of that recruiting class, but he wasn't someone that guys like me and you on National Signing Day were probably clamoring about or hyping up or any of that stuff. And he might have been their best player on either side. I mean, Xavier Worthy's pretty good, but Quinn Ewers is pretty, there were some guys. Kelvin Banks is good, but Jalen Ford was the heart and soul, I feel like, of the defense and maybe of that team. And he wasn't rated. Your options in this year's class are very limited. So, like, looking specifically as a guy who might be outside the top 100, who could make a huge impact, I'm going to go with Andre Kojo at Mansfield Timberview. There's only a couple guys that fit that description, but Kojo, 6'6", 345-pounder. He's very athletic for a big man. And not a whole lot of people have been talking about him in this year's class. One, because Texas returns a whole lot of talent up front next year. And I don't think a lot of people figure that Kojo is going to factor immediately into the depth chart, right? So give this guy a year in the strength and conditioning program, maybe 2 years, and he could possibly be the anchor at right tackle, or, grow into a powerhouse offensive guard. I guess he doesn't need to grow any, but, change into an offensive guard up front and be a guy that you can really put someone like Baxter behind, who's going to clear a lot of lanes and do a lot of damage. Could grow into an all-conference caliber type of offensive lineman.
It's a star-studded class there for the Texas Longhorns. Going to see if they can turn that into conference contention, whether that's the Big 12 this year or the SEC down the road. Powers, appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching this clip here on YouTube. If you like this kind of stuff and you want more of it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, you can watch us live every weekday at noon at TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, or here on YouTube. And if you want more of the best coverage of football in the state of Texas, check out TexasFootball.com and become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com/subscribe.